With great pleasure, we welcome back to the show General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, as always, sir, thank you for coming on. What you make of the current play? What you make of the current situation?
Well, certainly we've had major issues with the ceasefire, and we've seen the Iranians, the IRGC, try to conduct intervention attacks in the Straits of Hormuz for several weeks now. We've defended successfully against fast boats, against drones, you name it. And a number of ships have been moving through there in the lane that we opened up. Admittedly, nothing close to what it used to be, 100 ships a day or so. But nonetheless, considerable violations by the Iranians. In Lebanon, the violations are much more serious. They are done principally by Hezbollah, and they have conducted over 2,000 drone and missile attacks in the northern Israel, forcing the evacuation, Larry, of villages and towns in that area. 300 plus Israeli citizens have been wounded, one killed as a result of all of that. Israel cannot stand idly by while this happens. Even under the terms of the ceasefire agreement, it permits Israel to attack when these things are happening. One, an operation is being planned and they're aware of it. Two, an operation is imminent and they see it. Number three, it's being executed. They can operate against all of those. And they have operated against all of those, to include operations that were being planned in southern Beirut by Hezbollah's operational headquarters. So what is happening here, let's not get any confusion here. These ceasefires in the Straits of Hormuz and in Lebanon are all driven by Iran and its proxies, not the United States and certainly not Israel. Israel is in a defensive mode responding to that escalation. And then, of course, we saw Iran attack Israel with 11 ballistic missiles. To remind our audience, a single ballistic missile with the lethality that it has, a couple of stories high in height of this missile, can kill hundreds of people in a single neighborhood. All 11 of those were defeated by Israel and the United States air defense system protecting them, thankfully so. And obviously, as a result of that, Israel has responded in kind. Where are we now? Israel has agreed to stand down. The president has asked him to do that, and he's also asked Iran to do that. The problem with that is Israel will stand down. The president asked them, they will do that. Iran, when the president asks them, they normally don't do that. No. That is kind of where we are. And we're heading into the promise, once again, of negotiations. We're close to our deal, close to a deal. The president has more information than you and I and everybody else put together. And we're hopeful that that is the case. But if it's not the case, clearly the preferred option after 8 weeks of frustration must be to return to military operations, 10 days, 14 days. Let's finish this. Let's put them in the most vulnerable position they have ever been in. And remind ourselves, what is President Trump trying to truly accomplish here? It is the strategic reset of the entire region for generations to come. This is about peace and stability in the region. So the Gulf states, so Israel, so all the countries in the region can have finally stability to go forward with economic deals, prosperity, Abraham Accords. And Iran is no longer the predator and actor that they have been for 47 years. And in their introduction riff, they pointed out how they've been a killing machine, not only against their own people, but against the United States. That is what we are trying to stop here. And I give credit to the president. He hasn't given up on it. He's frustrated, to be sure, but you got to remind ourselves, who are we dealing with here? These are diabolical, tyrannical, ideological believers in this regime. They are running the place. They are evil. And that's the reality of it. At the end of the day, I truly believe what it's going to likely come down to is having to go after them and to kill as many of them as we possibly can, capture some if we can, but take all the instruments of tyranny away from them once and for all. It is likely the solution that has to come at some point.
President Trump has not ruled out additional military action.
He has not.
And he has not moved his red lines. I mean, at least every public utterance. He does seem to want a deal, But if it doesn't get the deal he wants, he pulls back. I mean, it sounds like, and we're not privy to all the information as you suggested, but they may be close or not. But if he doesn't get what he wants, he's not going to sign on to it. And he's pulled back. I think we've learned that before. His economic squeeze is intensifying. The economic fury from Scott Bessent is, they're using the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets in ways that have never been used before, and it's terrific. Taking these, literally seizing offshore Iranian assets and maybe liquidating them, and now perhaps giving them to our Gulf allies to recover whatever damage. In other words, it's an odd story, but the deal's not there. The president's not easing his conditions, and military action is still on the table. And one thinks that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say everyone. This president, just one little parenthetical. Having worked for him, and part of my job was National Security Council. He doesn't really want a war. He doesn't really want more bombing, but he will if he has to.
Yeah, I agree.
And the other point I want to make, John Keane, he will go for the decapitation strategy, whether that's Israel's Mossad or our CIA or whomever. The Soleimani is instructive. The al-Baghdadi death is instructive. The decapitation, I'm willing to bet, is very much on his radar screen.
No, there's no doubt about that. And, there's another side to the president that we should remind ourselves. He looks at war as a horrific thing, which it really is. Mm-hmm. And he speaks to the killing on both sides as something that we should stop. But the problem is, who are we really dealing with here? And this is a very different evil that we have to recognize. And we're giving it time. What Bessent and his economic team is doing is extraordinary. But also, I remind ourselves who these people are. Mm. The amount of economic peril that we can impose on the regime and on the people. They don't care about the suffering. They will absorb that because their strategy here is to drag this out as much as possible as we can. They believe in their head that we get close to the midterm elections, it's unlikely the president would conduct any military operations whatsoever. That is what their belief system is. I think they're likely to miscalculate again. You know the president. I don't know him as well as you do, but I do have some sense of him for sure.
They sell him short just on political grounds. They're going to be completely wrong. He said as much. He said he don't care about the midterms. Now, he probably cares about the midterm, but they're not till November. We're still in June. Right. There's a long time period to take additional military action, additional economic action, if you may, additional decapitation action. There's many months left to do that.
We have evidence of this kind of miscalculation. Prior to the 12-day war, the president gave them a 60-day deadline. It kind of rings because we're about to go into one of those. And he tried to negotiate the deal with them then that he's attempting to do now. On the 61st day, he green-lighted Israel to begin the 12-day war, which he participated in himself around the 10th or 11th day. That is evidence of what the president means when he says, I am still going to use military force if you don't make a deal. I think that's the path that we're likely on. And as we've said before, he has information we don't have. If we can get this deal, and you and I have underscored the importance of this deal, no money.
That's right.
We cannot finance the recovery.
Right.
It's got to be the maximalist objectives that we're trying to achieve, and we already know what that list looks like.
When he said that on NBC Meet the Press or whatever, I was very happy to hear him say that. It's very, very important. No money, and you said this, they'd have to change their behavior and their whole regime before we even think about giving them any money. That's what, Trump, the businessman, understands the economic side, financial side, probably better than other presidents, just as he's allowed the military side to go on ahead and do the work they have to do. But the thing is, you've said this a million times, and you can't, Iran they don't abide by deals. Your opening remarks said what they're doing with respect to Israel and Lebanon, they're doing that consciously. They want to muddy the waters. They want to distract from the issue of their surrender. They never, when I interviewed the president way back in February, just before the military assault, I said to him, nobody ever trusts Iran to deal on a deal. And he said that may be true. You can't can't believe that. What does a deal mean with Iran anyway?
Well, even on the JCPOA deal, I mean, you know, the secret sites that we bombed during the 12-day war, those 2 to 3 secret sites, where did we get those from? We got those from Iranian informants, that they were building secret sites that the IAEA was not inspecting, and to do what? To create a nuclear bomb.
Yes.
That, if they sign a deal, I am absolutely convinced that what they will do is begin to recover. This is why the money is so important. You don't give them the money to recover, and they'll try to reverse everything that they agreed to in the deal.
Yes.
That is their history, and we have to look at that coldly in terms of who they really are.
I was also pleased yesterday to hear the president repeat his pledge to go after the enriched uranium, one way or another, as part of a deal or not. But he's not dropping that off his various, red lines. And I think I don't see him budging, sir. I don't see him budging. And if he doesn't budge and the situation doesn't change, then the military option comes about.
Yeah, it's the seminal part of the deal because it is the existential threat, not just to the Israelis. I mean, we've got to remind our audience, why is the nuclear thing so important to us? Obviously, we fear they would use a weapon against Israel, but what would happen? The Arab states and the other countries in the region, once they know that they're going to have a nuclear weapon, what are they going to do? They're going to get nuclear weapons. That is the only defense they have. And I take caution from what Henry Kissinger said to me once, and more than once. Jack, the most serious geopolitical event in my lifetime is not World War II. It's Iran having a nuclear weapon leading to nuclear proliferation in the region, and likely the first nuclear exchange in the history of man. That is something we cannot ever permit to happen.
100% agreed. General Jack Keane, thank you for visiting.
Always good talking
to you, sir.
to you.
Terrific stuff. We appreciate it.